recorded.
Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Talking with the Steps with Stephan and Nancy. And we're a little late for step 5 as it is June 2nd, but better late than never. So this is going to be talking about step 5. Hi, Stephan, Nancy.
Hey, Lara, thank you.
Hey, Lara, thank you.
Yes, thanks for doing this. This is really awesome. I'm getting good feedback from folks about our talks. So,
oh, good.
Yeah, so thanks again for agreeing to do this. Oh, so take it up with Stephan, Nancy on step 5.
Okay, thank you. Nancy?
Okay, Stephan. Well, welcome everybody to step 5. And as we all know, step 5 says that, what does step 5? I will say it. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And so obviously step 5 follows step 4, where hopefully we have made a very good survey of our past. And I love how at the end of step 4 in the big book, it says that if we've made an inventory of our grosser handicaps, that we've made a good beginning. And so that tells me that there might be some fine tuning in those mental handicaps that are yet to be seen. And in my view, that is what a step 5 is designed to help us see. The 12 and 12, just took a brief glance at that before we started, and it had just such a great launching place, I think, to talk about step 5. And that's that if we've come to know how wrong thinking and action have hurt us and others, then the need to quit living alone with those tormenting ghosts of yesterday gets more urgent. So if I've seen in my step 4 that my wrong thinking and my wrong action have hurt me, then this need to not live alone with these is very important. And that's what step 5 is designed to help us do, that we are going to admit them to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. I can think that I have, okay, in our big book says that we don't think a solitary self-appraisal is sufficient, right? Because I have a settled way of looking at my past. Even though I've made a beginning in writing out my 4-column inventory and my fear inventory and a sex inventory and a new ideal, these things will remain theoretical until I take the next step, which is to admit them to myself. And if I have a person who has had an experience with this process, and in step 5, then they are aware of maybe where misthought can hide and where my own justifications for my actions might still rule my thinking. And so I want to expose my settled way of thinking, because I really do. I want to know how I have hurt others and myself. And so I'm ready to admit, and to, even though I might be nervous, I was very nervous. I've done, inventories in the beginning of my sobriety, and I just, took a big deep breath, and I read all of my inventory, and sometimes they ask me to burn it, and that was done. I don't do that. I don't recommend that, because that's where a lot of information is that I'll still want to use when I get into the later steps. But I've had the feeling of nothing happened. I've had the feeling of I don't think that really did anything, but it is a necessary step. And I had subsequent experiences where that was not the case, where I did have an experience that, and maybe it just took a few times for me because I had a lot of blocks, I think, in my mind towards seeing my wrong thinking in another light. And our big book tells us, that if I don't do this, I will remain under constant fear and tension. That never feels good. And if I have a person that I can share this with, it does that understands the nature of my thinking, maybe because they share the same nature in theirs, and when they've gone through this process, that they can really help me to see and to then divulge, those things that I swore that I would never say, that I never wanted to look at again myself. So I guess that's my preliminary opening, and Stephen, let me hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. So I've got a story about step 5. When I first wrote out my inventory, I did it in an autobiographical form for a couple reasons. Well, here's 3 of them. 1, I didn't have a sponsor really. And 2, I couldn't understand the directions in the big book. They didn't resonate with me. And 3, I was determined that at the 5th step, I was going to list all my wrongs. And I didn't care as I was writing this out, the embarrassment, the shame, the guilt over some of the things I'd done in my life. I was going to put it all down, and I was going to talk to another person, which I did. And the person I talked to had a lot of time in AA. I probably had a year, and he might have had 4. I mean, I couldn't even conceive of somebody having that much time in AA. But he was a kind and good person. And so we made an appointment. We sat in this room off. He had a house on Mercer Island on the waterfront, and a little room off the kitchen with a little fireplace in it and stuff. And the setting was really nice. And he listened to me as I went page after page on my legal pad. And he would comment once in a while along the lines of, I did that too, or I did something similar, or that. And there was never a doubt that I was going to skip over something. I said it all. And at the very end of it, we looked in the big book, and they talk about the 5th step promises. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience, and on and on. I had none of that. And so he assumed that I did. And he was excited for me, and I could see that. And I thought, big deal. I grew up Catholic, so I'd been to confession lots of times, although this time I didn't lie. And as Nancy mentioned, it had happened to her before. He said, now toss that in the fireplace, and it's all gone. And I left feeling like, well, whatever's supposed to happen didn't happen, but at least I can now go back to my meetings and say that I did a 5th step and did it right and feel superior to those that haven't done one yet. So that's kind of what I got out of it. Then I got involved with somebody who had recovered from alcoholism and was happy to show me what he did through going through the book together, and had a completely different experience. And when we got to the 5th step, he said, what do you suppose the most important part of the 5th step is, Steve? And I said, well, that I leave nothing out. To me, that was kind of a no-brainer, that I'm completely honest and leave nothing out. And he said, what if that's very important, but it's not the most important thing. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, let's look what the fifth step says on the walls, and in the book, in how it works. Admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And it still isn't ringing a bell to me. And I'm saying, yeah, I know that. And he said, so we want to see what the nature, not only the nature of your wrong or your mistake or your error is, we want to see the exact nature of it. And I remember saying, what are you talking about? And he said, well, let's look at what the fifth step says again. We want to see what the exact nature of your mistake is, of your wrongs are. And I had never had the fifth step presented to me in that way. And not that he was minimizing at all the great need to tell our whole story as it's outlined. Of course, my inventory was different this time. It was done along the format the book suggests for us. But what I got to see was, first of all, we looked up the word nature, and it said like the essence of. And so with trying not to misinterpret what the book said in any way, they were asking, can I see what the exact essence of what's wrong with me is? And as we went through the different parts of the inventory, what I saw was in each and every resentment, in the fear inventory, in the sex inventory, everything, in each and every one, there was a part or a whole of it that I thought things should be different. And they weren't. They were just as they were. And so when he brought up some questions like, what do you think your life might look like if you lived as things are, not as you wish them to be? And it was a process that, because my mind had never entertained that kind of a notion before. Like, what do you mean? Let me think. The exact nature of my wrong. What mistake did I make? I actually thought and I believed that things should be different than they are. And it was one of the most moving experiences I've had in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I saw with every single resentment, that I could find the place where I thought things should be different, and they weren't. So now I know, after I did my first inventory and, figured, hey, I did it right, because I talked about the shameful things, and I didn't leave anything. If I thought of it, I had it in my inventory. But nobody said until I was going through it with somebody who had recovered from alcoholism, nobody had ever asked me, Steve, what was the exact nature of your wrongs? But I think if somebody would have asked me that, I would have said something along the lines of, well, I saw that I was selfish and self-centered, kind of like politically correct things to say in Alcoholics Anonymous. But they didn't have depth and weight behind them, because I learned early on in AA that it's always acceptable to say, well, I'm working on not being so selfish, and I'm working on not being so self-centered. But I never really saw that selfishness and self-centeredness, in one way of looking at it, they were effects of a much deeper problem, that I truly thought things should be different than they are. And the wonderful news is things aren't different than they are. They're exactly as they are. So that's what I came away with when I did the fifth step with somebody that had had the experience of recovery in the fifth step. And every word in those fifth step promises I was experiencing. I couldn't even articulate how freeing it was feeling to see that it was just like the book says, the main problem centered in my mind, not in what other people did or didn't do. And of course, with me, I would say it was soon lost, that feeling that I was in a holy, HOLY, a holy place, that I actually saw what my problem was. But it's I've noticed I can revisit that often, that place. And one of the fifth step promises is that the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. Well, going into the fifth step, I already had been freed of the obsession, but those words took on a new meaning too. It's like drinking never was the problem. Drinking was always, just like the book says, a symptom of the problem. And I think the way these steps are set up, particularly the fifth step, it's just miraculous, because, and then in the years that have followed this, I've been part of and witnessed to and participated in many fifth steps, where having the solid foundation that Nancy talked about in the fourth step, it just naturally flows. But to this day, if the meeting is on the fifth step, if that's the topic, and it could just be the meetings that I've been going to, rarely hear about this exact nature of a wrong. It's more along the lines of, which is good too, that I withheld nothing, or I did withhold something and here was the consequences of that. So this fifth step, afterwards, I really felt a part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was a great feeling, and still is. Okay, Nancy. You're on mute, honey.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for what you shared. It was well articulated, and my experience as well. Maybe that's a part of our fear, that I can do something on the surface and I can appear to do it very thoroughly, but this is about a complete reorganization or realignment, and it wants to get down to the causes and conditions, which, as we learned, the cause is in my mind, and this nature of my wrong, I would mistake that for 1,000 different actions that made me guilty, but the nature of my mistake, which I didn't learn till many years later, which was, no matter what the form, the content was the same. And it was that I believe I'm alone, and like you said, Stephen, things shouldn't be this way. I'm alone. I'm on my own. I had very strong feelings of like, I'm on my own here. It's up to me. And I'm on my own, and I'm not enough. And so with those beliefs at the core of my thought processes, I would be driven to get more, take more of everything. And so this idea, when I could begin to question that, and a good sponsor or person who listens to your fifth step, who has also found that same thought process in their own mind, and that it's been at least begun to be overcome, then that adds to this is not impossible, that this is more than possible. And I love that when we return home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. And it says, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. And I actually today have people do that when they are alone, to actually say, thank you, God, that I know you better. Even if it's not a felt thing, it is a statement of an ideal of where I want to live. I want to know God better. That's how I begin to feel the nearness, and the nearness of my Creator that was pointed out to me, as just the movement, the fact that I'm in a fifth step, that is proof that God is moving and moving me closer, certainly not farther away. And then those last questions, is our work solid, that we are given another opportunity in case we withheld anything, that, that we don't want to skimp on the cement, or the sand, meaning we need a big enough God, right, in our second and third step, that I have enough God that is going to meet this problem of I'm so alone, that do I have enough problem that I believe I'm alone, and enough solution that God is here to meet that belief that every human carries at some level, until we don't. So with that, let me turn it back to Lara or you, Stephen, if you have something else to add.
Yeah, I wanted to say this. I'm really privileged to be in this little group talking about the steps. Lara and Nancy and I have known each other for over 35 years in AA, to a greater or lesser degree. And the fifth step is the first step that I can actually take with me and use the rest of my life, because can I remember what the exact nature of my wrong was? It was in every resentment I ever had. So when I start to feel like, and it can come like with many people in a nanosecond, just that stab that, this shouldn't be happening, but yet it is. And often that I can use, that's a shortcut for me to the pause. Like, okay, wait a minute, I'm determined that this shouldn't be happening, this thing that already is happening or has happened. And do I want to go down that road again? And so it was a step that it keeps on giving.
Yes.
And that's my story about that. And I see Lara stepped away for a second, so. Oh, so the end, Lara.
Unless you have a question, if you have a question, Lara.
The only question I had is, how are you guys so amazingly awesome all the time?
Oh, because we're at intergroup often.
That's right. You're at service at intergroup, and you come to the Seattle group.
That is true. And it's a matter of learning to trust this process, which only happens when we are faced with something impossible, like a fear that has boggled me for my entire life, and everything that I have tried to minimize or get rid of that fear didn't work, but this did, and in a way that seems roundabout, but faith in the process, is demonstrated, through these steps. It becomes a living thing.
Well, you guys, I think you're amazing. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us today.
Thanks, you, Lara. Thanks for all you do.
Yes. See you soon.
See you later.